starting on my extreme left is Richard Haines and Helen in the middle, David beside me, and each of them will give you now a quick 2 or 3 minute overview of the role that their company has had in animation projects. Richard.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Richard Haines from Penguin. So we're Penguin Random House. We merged sort of almost 2 years ago. So Penguin Random House is the biggest trade publisher in the world. So we have a huge amount of sort of breadth and different projects that we do. But we really work in an animation sense. We work in a couple of different ways. The biggest way and the main way, what we've been doing for quite a long time, is working on taking TV shows and turning them into books. So we're the publisher for TV shows such as Peppa Pig, all the way up to sort of Doctor Who and various other things, from live action all the way down to young preschool. We do In the Night Garden and a lot of successful shows in that area. And we're launching this year. We're launching the Furchester and Hey Dougie and the Clangers are our sort of 3 big launches for this year. So we'll work with the creators of the shows and we'll create the books of those shows, working in a lot of different ways, different types of books, from activity books and everything else in between. The other thing that we sort of do in the animation sense, we've also in the last sort of 5 years, I suppose, and really sort of in the last couple of years in a bigger way, got into sort of more bigger projects in the animation sense. So we co-produce a number of TV shows now, including Peter Rabbit animation, the Topsy and Tim live action, the Snowman and Snow Dog on Channel 4, and we're soon to launch Puffin Rock with the guys at Cartoon Saloon and Nickelodeon, which we're very excited about, and it's on RTE at the moment, and doing very well, I understand. So we're sort of very excited about that. That's a kind of a new direction for us, and it's something we're keen to do more of in the coming years, and I think that's probably what I'll be talking about most today.
Good, thank you. Helen, Walker Books.
Well, Walker Books is quite unique. It's one of the few independent publishing companies that exist in the world. It has 3 sort of centres, one in London, where about 120 of us work, and then there's Candlewick Press based in Boston, which is a big award-winning publishing house in the US. That's about 100 people, and then we've got an office in Sydney in Australia, which is about 50 people. We turn over about £60 million a year. We're very profitable, we're very successful. We have some very big brands, global brands such as Guess How Much I Love You, Maisie. We publish all of the Anthony Horowitz titles. Where's Wally? Where's Waldo? Depending which side of the pond you live on. So we are quite a sort of successful independent publisher. What makes us a little bit different is that we, quite a few years ago, took the idea of wanting to be more involved in developing and owning rights and just being part of the animation industry and part of other media. We understand that children access media across all formats. It's not just books, it's not just digital books, it's absolutely everything, and we felt it important to be part of that space. So we did a couple of sort of strategic things. We brought all our licensing rights back in-house. So quite unusually as a publisher, we manage our own licensing business. That particularly is at the moment Guess How Much I Love You, which is a big global licensing brand. And we have experts that have worked at the BBC and ITV that are our licensing managers. And we set up Walker Productions as a sort of development entity to work with wonderful companies such as Jam Media and Brown Bag, and hopefully others in Ireland, but also we work in Singapore and in Canada and obviously in the UK itself. And that really was about taking some of our projects that we felt could have some legs in another medium and working really closely with other animation companies, and we also do live action. And that was something that was slightly different in publishing. We started that 7 years ago, and projects such as Henry Huggle Monster, Tilly and Friends with Jam, Huggle Monsters with Brown Bag. We do the Hank Zipser series. We co-produce that with Kindle in the UK. We've worked with Sparky in Singapore on Fleabag Monkey Face, and we work with Coolaby on Scream Street as well in the UK. So lots of different projects.
Thank you. Lots of stuff. David Maybury was at one time in development with Brown Bag. He's now running the Scholastic office in London. Scholastic is a US publisher, but David was there.
I don't know if they'd say they let me run it, per se.
Not yet.
Although, thank you for the promotion. One of the greatest parts of being over has been that no one knows who the hell Scholastic are, so I'll start with that and the stuff they make me say. Scholastic are the biggest children's publisher in the world. Last year they surpassed $2 billion worldwide. We publish some of the largest brands in the world: Disney, Star Wars, Peanuts, Minecraft are the first few I can think of. Scholastic publish books for kids, and that's the ethos and philosophy behind the company. It is wholly independently owned by one family, and the ethos has been kind of led from our MD in the US the whole way through. And we sell books directly to every kid in Ireland, in the UK, the US, Asia, India, and South America through our clubs, book clubs and book fairs in every school, most countries at this point. The stuff they don't make me say, and the stuff I can kind of get excited about, is you'll probably know who Scholastic are because of the books we publish. The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Horrible Histories as a license, Philip Pullman, The Northern Lights, and his Dark Materials trilogy, Tom Gates, and the very awesome Captain Underpants. And in terms of media and animation stuff, Scholastic is a massive, massive company. We have Scholastic Media in the US, headed up, or until very, very recently, headed up by Deborah Forte, who's just gone to set up a new production company, Silver Tongue, which will be working with Universal on a first look basis for us in live action. And Deborah and Scholastic Media have headed up co-pros on Goosebumps, Magic School Bus, Clifford the Big Red Dog, which is now going into a feature film with DreamWorks along with Captain Underpants. And alongside that then, alongside the live action Universal deal that they've just announced, we're talking to animation studios about doing the same thing with an animation studio, to have an animation partner who will kind of work with us on developing new projects. We're also working with Dylan Collins, who's Dublin head from Trinity, with his internet digital marketing firm, Super Awesome. And then we're talking to an MCN about YouTube VOD as well. Ta-da!
Very good. I work as an animation producer in Dublin, and when I was dragged out of the wonderful world of live action into the even more wonderful world of animation, the first two projects were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Budgie the Helicopter, both of them based on existing published works. So, how would a producer or an animator go about acquiring rights in existing published work? Let's do it and turn it on the table. What should they do?
The rights issue is always the most complicated, I think, in all of these, because it depends who holds them. As the publisher, we may publish the books, but we won't necessarily control the rights for for any adaptation of it. We may in some instances control the rights. It kind of depends on actually who has the rights in the first place. So I think that's probably the first thing to find out. Generally, the publisher, if they don't control the rights, will be able to help facilitate that anyway if they have. So you always speak to them in the first instance. It's probably the easiest way, and then it's you go through the option and everything else in that sense. And one of the things that we're sort of doing, and I think, to Helen's point, is we're trying to be more actively involved in this as opposed to sort of passively just letting things happen. So we're in a number of scenarios, we're looking to invest and co-produce in those ways. So sometimes if the producers come to us and it's a project that we're really excited about and we would like to do, we would look to sort of work with them to get the option rights, but we'd also look to sort of co-produce and invest in those projects.
So if the book exists, it's there, and a producer comes along or an animator comes along and wants to turn that into a TV series, which rights do they then acquire? Just television rights or broader than that?
Well, I mean, just to add to what Richard said, it's quite a complicated business. Mm-hmm. And I think the points I would like to add on to Richard's is two very important people to remember. One is that most relatively successful authors and illustrators have agents, and publishing agents are quite a unique breed of their own. And the other thing is you have to remember the author and the illustrator themselves. So no matter who holds the rights, whether it's the publisher or the agent, or sometimes the authors hold on to the rights themselves, this is a relationship business, and this is about understanding that kind of dynamic and making sure that you can bring those people along. And that often is what takes a lot of the time, that when you're approaching a publisher and saying we'd love to buy the animation rights and take an option, then sometimes that kind of 3 or 4 way piece becomes the complex piece. So the animators that I find that are most successful are the ones that build relationships with not only the publisher but also with the agents, and that seems to be happening more and more. There are sort of events now where agents are coming, and I think that's very helpful because it is, as I've said, a relationship business. But in terms of the option, I mean, every deal is different. It depends what you want. If you want to option the rights to create an animation feature or an animation TV series, and that's what you option. If you want to invest and take licensing and merchandising rights, and it really, every deal that we do is very different. And every deal that we do with the animators that we work with is different. It really depends on what you as a company want to do. Sometimes animators have maybe tried to run a little bit before they walk, so they've gone, we want to just take everything and we're going to be our own brand management company and we're going to do everything, and that's really tough. So I always think, look at what you've got and what you can offer and what you bring to the table. Be very sort of realistic about your company and what it can do.
Being realistic and trying to focus right down, David, how much? How much is like a piece of string? How much for an auction? How much for the rights, the TV rights?
I got the tough
For
one.
5 years?
No, it's not really.
An option for 12 months, whatever it is. What kind of money are we talking about? Hundreds,
Averages-
thousands, tens of thousands?
Averages is what, 2 to
Yeah.
5k.
Yeah.
It's not
It's never
crazy
ever
money.
going to be much higher than that.
Yeah.
And broadly speaking, that's about right.
Yeah, an option itself isn't particularly expensive,
That's right.
but obviously you then need to do the development, and you need to
And
be,
the
you obviously need a
investment behind
budget
that.
for the development.
Yeah.
So it's not, there's no point optioning the rights even if it costs you £2,000 if you're not going to do anything with them, because that's a waste of £2,000. So you need then to have a sort of a development budget in place of how you're actually going to fund it to get it ready, because actually the option doesn't mean that anything's going to happen. So you've still got to go through all of the stuff and then get broadcasters to come on board, and you've also got to be willing to go into the actual production, which is the very expensive part of it. So the option itself is actually relatively cheap in comparison, but obviously you need everything in place to be able to activate that option.
And you'll only get an option for a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
And agents, particularly in publishing, are getting very savvy to the amount of times that they're going to allow. So, I mean, at one time you could say, could I have something for 2 years, for 3 years? Because the thing, things take a while to develop, things take a while to sort of get going. Agents are getting very tough now. That we're getting things pushed back to us 12 months, 18 months at the most, which is hard because, it takes a long time to build your finances and build your story, if you like. So it is quite tough out there. But its entry point is relatively cheap, I think. Where you start earning your money is when you actually start going into production, and that's when you start to either earn your production fees, and that's when also the authors and illustrators start to earn. They don't earn much from options. I mean, a couple of grand once you've taken the agent's commission off. It's not life-changing.
If the option fee is some thousands, what are the legal costs associated with that? Because that's an extra. And
Sure.
would the animator or the producer coming to the publisher, would that person be expected also to pay the legal fees of the publisher?
Not of the publisher side, but they certainly have to cover their own costs because we all have in-house legal.
Okay.
So our end will be covered, but they'll certainly have to cover. Like if you get a contract, it's never advisable to do it yourself.
Yes.
I'm assuming.
Okay, let's look at a couple of the specific Irish projects. Now, I know both Walker and Penguin have projects specifically with Irish animation studios. So, Walker Books, you've got Huggle Monsters with Brownback.
Well, we
Tell us a bit
had,
about-
yes,
well,
yeah.
How all that
Yeah.
came about.
Well, Huggle Monsters was a sort of slightly a unique, if you like, property because it was the first project that we put into Walker Productions when I started there 8 years ago, and because we were setting up the business, we were very open to maybe giving away more rights than perhaps nowadays. We'd probably be a bit more careful about what we held on to. But what's interesting about Hugger Monsters, it was based on a book by an Irish author who I believe was your children's laureate, Niamh Sharkey, wonderful Irish author, based in Dublin. And the book was called I'm a Happy Hugglewug. It was published by Walker I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. Didn't actually do particularly well. It's non-narrative, wonderful characters, wonderful characterization, but no story. And myself and Mike D, who was working for me at the time in development, when we started at Walker, we saw it and we thought there's something here. There's something here that we think, because we're both ex-BBC and other sort of TV companies, that we felt there was something that we could develop. And we approached Brown Bag and Carl at Brown Bag, and we developed together. And we did a lot of work on the development, and it wasn't just a question, you know, when you're taking a non-narrative book and turning that into potentially a kids' TV series, that's a lot of work. I would say it took us about a year to develop. A couple of interesting points. Neve was very involved in the development. She was very involved in all the research we did. We did a lot of research around happiness. There'd been a lot of things in the news at that time about children in the UK particularly not being very happy, and some of the headmasters at schools had put happiness on the curriculum. So there's a big buzz about that, and we felt that we could sort of tie some of those issues into Henry. And we developed it together and spent money together and took it to Disney, and Disney bought it.
And so does Walker still have a role in that?
Not now. We earned at the beginning at the front end, and we have a back end share, which, because it's Disney, I suspect we'll never see anything of that. Don't quote that, please. Don't quote that. But as I've said, we probably wouldn't do that deal now. We would want to hold on to much more rights. But it got us started. And sometimes you make reasons in your business for, you know, reasons of timing and and we got our name out there, and people could see that we could do it. And so it was worth it. And also, very interestingly, Neve works as an associate producer on the show. She earns from it. She writes on it. She's written on the second series. She now has Gotham in LA as her agent. So she's gone from being just an illustrator, and a very good one, to having a much broader career now. And that's very satisfying for us.
Good. And Penguin has Puffin Rock.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So obviously Puffin Rock, from the fantastic guys at Cartoon Saloon. I guess everyone saw their film yesterday, probably cried at the end, like we all did. And so I think this sort of came about in the sense that I know that Tom had come up with the idea quite a long time ago, and had been sort of working around and sort of looking at various things to sort of make it work, and it hadn't quite sort of got into production. And so then they partnered with the guys at Dog Ears, who were going to work with them to sort of help start it off in other ways, and their ideas were to do apps and books. And from that sense, they went to the Children's Media Conference in Sheffield, which is a fantastic event and sort of well worth attending. And I mean, this is kind of a story of that. They took it to the Children's Media Conference, and they just showed it around, and it sort of caught the eye of Penguin, and they're like, okay, this is exciting, this is interesting. Hold off on the publishing and the app ideas. Let's just do it properly as a TV show, because it deserves to be a TV show. And I think so. Then it's so we were then able to put money into to help it kind of get to the stage so that we could actually finance production. And obviously RTE were heavily involved at the beginning. Irish Film Board, Nickelodeon sort of came on board, and it all sort of started to go from there. And we just went into production, started making it. And we've delivered series 1, that's on now, and we've gone straight into series 2. So we're working on series 2 at the moment. It's just fantastic to get series 2 sort of up and going pretty much before series 1 has proved itself, which I think is a real positive of the way that people view the show, and hopefully a sign that it's going to be very successful. But we've worked really closely with the team on that. I think it was 3 years ago when we first saw it, so it's a long process. It's just going on air now, and I think that's the one thing, that these things take an enormous amount of time, a lot more time than you would possibly ever think that they would take, and then that's even a relatively smooth sort of one for us. And I know that Cartoon's going to be working on it for sort of 3 or 4 years before we even saw it. I think it's about 7 years in total. So we've worked with them. Obviously, the look is all theirs, and developed that. But we've worked really closely with them on the scripts. I think from a publishing perspective, we sort of think that the storytelling aspect is something that we can really be involved in, and we know about. We've got a lot of people that know a lot about telling stories in our business. So that's kind of where we work on, and we've also worked with them on the sort of, helping out on all of the commercial and creative exploitation of the show. And it's sort of been a real collaborative process all the way through. It's sort of 3 partners. From that side, us, Dog Ears, a Cartoon Saloon, and everything sort of runs as a sort of 1/3. And we make sort of joint decisions that way as we go through. And obviously, anything to do with the animation and the look and the feel, we sort of bow down to Cartoon Saloon's expertise in that. We don't think we're going to tell them how to create animation, but everybody kicks in and sort of gives their own expertise and what they think.
Okay, so for animators or producers here, or even students here, they come up with a design or an idea or a storyline or whatever. How do they approach a publisher? Do they go to Frankfurt to the book fair? Do they bring it to Cartoon Forum?
They go to Frankfurt.
How do you find them? How do they find you?
Bologna?
David? Oh, sorry.
Pouring water. Bologna is probably the one of the easiest places. I mean, CMC is a great place to be.
But you say that, but we don't. I mean, I'm just being really frank here.
Yeah.
We are incredibly busy at Bologna. It's the big rights fair that's held in March every year. And on our stand are just sales teams. And our sales teams are back to back every half hour. They never stop. And so anybody just turning up, and I'm just being really honest, it's very hard to get somebody to talk to. And I suspect that's the same on your big stand.
Yeah, it's
as
hard.
well.
It's hard enough for me to get on the stand.
Yeah.
Because our sales team on the never mind other people.
It's truly commercial business.
I
From,
think
from our side,
rights
it's
selling.
easier when we have everybody together because it's a US company. Like
Yeah.
you're guaranteed to have everyone at Bologna. You're guaranteed to have everybody at Frankfurt. That's really why I'm thinking, or London to a point.
I would say things like this and CMC and
CMC
all of
is
those
probably the easiest.
all of those events, because what's great about those things is a bit like this is you can just sort of be in the bar and chat to people. Everyone's very approachable. So I would say if you've got ideas, just I know these guys are as well, but you just want to see what people's ideas are. I'm always happy to sort of see stuff, even if it's in a really rough area, and just sort of give some advice or say that wouldn't work for us or that might work for us, come and show us, or we can do something on that. And I think that's, from our perspective, that's what we would like to do. And that's kind of one of the main reasons for not just the scenery, but coming to events like this is that you sort of want to meet people you wouldn't meet in your day-to-day sort of job and see ideas that people have got. So I think the more events like this and like CMC and like all of those other things that are real sort of networking conference events are really important. And I think if you seriously want to do this, they're incredibly important, because that's how you get to see people. And even if you haven't got anything to work with them on now, you might have something in 2 years or 3 years time, and then at least you know them, you can put a name to the face, and you can get out and just network and talk to people. I think that really is. But don't be afraid to approach publishers. We're all on LinkedIn and Twitter and email and stuff.
We're not difficult to find.
It's very easzy to get hold of us.
But I agree with you, though. I think it is easier at these kind of events. I actually think it is quite difficult to approach publishers, if I'm being honest. I mean, we don't accept manuscripts just off the... If you're non-agented, for most big publishers now, you won't get your project in front of an editor or a publisher. So that's why I think these events become more and more important. CMC, I absolutely concur. I sit on the board of the London Book Fair as well, so I'm a big advocate of that fair. And actually, we've got a CMC event now happening in April at London Book Fair. So there are various ways. This hopefully will grow and grow. But looking back on most of my projects, I've probably seen them, clocked them, and then pursued them at events like this, rather than through some sort of formal kind of approach, if that makes sense. Certainly, John I met when I was at the BBC, and then I hounded him for Tilly and Friends and nabbed him at MIPCOM at a party. Gerard, I know, with Nellie and Nora, you showed me at the animation finance thing in Dublin 3 years ago. So I just want to sort of add, I think these events are important.
So networking
is
the key.
Tantamount to it.
Yeah, getting to know the people.
Yeah.
And then once you know the people, as you develop a project, you know to go to.
Who does what,
So let's assume that one of you takes an interest in a particular project and you say, okay, we're going to publish this, and meanwhile the producer is trying to raise his finance and get his TV series into production. Does the publisher look to have a financial participation in the production or even in the revenues once the series is finished?
Each
You're
deal is
not looking just for your money back out of the publishing.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes yes.
Everyone's going to go for as much of the rights as
Yeah.
they can possibly get. But as Helen said, no deal is ever the same. I mean, my role at Scholastic is different to... We have a licensing team. We have Scholastic Media who fulfill the kind of the same role that Helen would have at Walker. So I'm coming at it slightly differently. I'm never going to have the 250, 300k to give you a project to get it off the ground in development. What I will do is look at it 3 years earlier when it's a sketch on the back of a napkin and we develop it at the same time. and that we publish the books. And what we're looking to do is publish the books earlier, so that before there's a broadcast pickup, that we're working on projects much earlier with creators and making the studios. So if we're working, I'll pick on John because he's right there. So if we're working with Jam and their development team, that we publish a book. We're not, but if we were, that we publish it ahead of Nick or BBC or anybody else signing on, and that you'd be seeing the project a lot earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also it's about, I mean, you guys are the creators. It's about what you want. And I think that's why it's so important to learn as much as you can about the various aspects of the industry, because you will learn over the years what rights you want to hold on to, what you think you're best doing yourself and what you think you're best working with partners on. I mean, it is a learning journey that we're all on still. And I think that's very important to know what you want. What do you want your business or even if it's, you know, if it's just you, what do you want to get out of this? And then you can start to meet people and build up relationships and decide how you want to cut the pie, if you like, because it's all different.
Yeah, and I mean, just as we traditionally wouldn't take any revenue from anything other than publishing unless we were investing in the show. So with Puffin Rock, obviously we've invested in that. We're co-producer of that, so we obviously will take a share of all of the revenues that come in various ways, and we'll work on exploiting those with the guys. But for example, Peppa Pig, we're the publisher of. We make our money from the publishing. We don't get any money from anything else, and we would never expect to, or we wouldn't ever demand, if somebody was just selling us publishing rights, we wouldn't ever demand that they'd give us a back-end share of other things. It's only if we're investing in a bigger way, and if we invest in a bigger way, then, you know, we would obviously want a share as any sort of investor would in that sense. But if it's a publishing deal, it would just be the royalties and revenues would come from the publishing. We would look to exploit that in as many countries as possible, in as many ways as possible, but it would come from sort of just for that revenue.
Can I ask the broadcasters if an Irish company has developed a project and they're looking for production finance from the broadcaster and following on the BAI and the film board and so on, does it help if the producer comes to you with an idea for a project if there's already publishing interest in it? Tim, what about you?
So, for those of you that didn't hear me before, the whole idea of having, let's say, a relationship with Penguin around a piece of content like Puffin Rock is really advantageous. It's new and different brains coming into the mix. But for me, and the internal conversations I have with whether or not it's the US or my international colleagues or just within the UK and Ireland generally, it adds weight to the conversation. The fact that the idea is beautiful and brilliant and I have great passion behind it is lovely. But the fact that we are in a situation where, you know, Paul can come down to MIP and talk about it and the relationship he has with Penguin to all of my international colleagues really sort of aids the conversation. So that's a very long-winded way of saying yes, it does help, but really very much on a case-by-case basis. A beautiful idea, of course, something that's not as beautiful, it's more difficult. The other thing I'll say while I've got the mic is that great ideas come from anywhere. So if a publisher came to us with an idea without anyone else, that's great too. So I'll not shut up. But that's so yeah.
Can I just add that sometimes just on the, I don't know, I'm being a bit naughty this morning, sorry, but just on the other side, that actually it can be quite difficult. If you take a publishing property that has a great resonance and a great success in publishing, and you think, right, I'm going to make a television film or series out of it, actually that in itself brings a lot of complexity, because you have a brand that's already successful in a certain medium, and you have to do what's right by that property, and that can open up you know, in a way it can sometimes be more difficult as well. I mean, that's not saying that it can't be incredibly successful, because it can be, but there can also be some big fuck-ups as well, let me tell you. Sorry, but they can.
We've had a few of those.
You can see them where people have taken amazing picture books and made them look like a rubbish. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut up now.
Right. Storybook, and then a big old broadcaster deciding that they have a view about how it might want to look, and then all the complexities around putting that on air and so on and so forth. So yes, sometimes you have great success, sometimes, as you say, not so great.
Okay, thank you. In the Irish context, RTE, Pauline, do you often get projects that come to you with publishing deals attached? Is that common in Ireland?
Thanks. It is becoming more common. So Puff and Rock were obviously involved in as well, and that came with Penguin on board. Cartoon Saloon had brought Penguin on board for that. So it's becoming more. I mean, publishers are obviously more active in the production end of animation projects now. It wasn't in the past, but I think for us, it's not. I mean, we aren't looking for something that has a publishing deal attached to it because we're a non-commercial station, so we don't have a remit to go out and make money. Having said that, it is helpful because the more visible the brand is, the more visible children follow brands, and the more visible a project is, you know, across platforms and through books, the more success it will have as a television project. So we don't look for it, but we are seeing with Nellie and Nora and Puff and Rock, that is the trend, and it's great to have. I mean, animation budgets are so huge that the more partners that can be brought into the mix to get a project over the line, the better.
And so, just since you have the microphone with you at the moment, the other Irish publishers, so that anybody in this room that's trying to get their own project off the ground and don't know the international publishers just yet, are there Irish publishers that bring out work like that would come to you and say, here's this wonderful book?
O'Brien Press did the Secret of Kells publishing.
Yeah,
It's the only
O'Brien
thing.
Press. We haven't been really approached by publishers. We don't tend to. Encourage them to go off and find an animation studio producer that they find that has the same passion in their project to develop it and bring it to a stage where it's ready to pitch to me or to other broadcasters.
Okay, and just because the microphone is beside you, Sarah, at CBBC, how do you stand on projects coming with publishing rights allocated?
I actually look for it because for the slightly older age group that I work with, it removes an element of risk if you've got an evolved world and you kind of know what you're going to be pitching, and we do develop, so we're always actively pursuing it. There's also for us the added halo effect as public service broadcasters of encouraging children to read and encouraging also the cross-fertilisation between the two. We've got 2 examples at the moment, and people are here that are responsible for both. It's been very useful for Screen Street, which is a great series of books from Walker, to have a fully iterated world that we could take and pitch to a controller, which really gave it a leg up. Having said that, you cannot just slavishly adapt a book. You have to put some effort into how you bring the inner worlds and characters to life. So you will probably be looking for a really great writer outside of the author's sphere who will help you take that book on its journey to the screen. So it's not an absolute given, and there's quite a lot of work involved. And then I've got my more light-hearted story about Butter Snipes and Gumballs and how the value and power of a much cherished book can work. Because of all the books that could have been bought in the form of adaptation to an ambitious CGI animated beautiful TV show, it was Cheryl Taylor, our controller's favourite book as a child. And there was just, there was nothing further to be done after that. So you do have that. There are all sorts of different ways in because of the way we enter into our own personal relationship with books, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very much.
Thank you.
Agree with that.
Before I look for other questions from the floor and prepare your questions, just one thing that occurs to me as the industry changes and develops and technology improves, are e-books, digital books, relevant in any of this discussion? Are books for children ever published just as e-books, or are they always in print?
No, you
No.
can go
No,
straight to, we do, I think all of us probably do straight to e-book publishing. I mean, I think the only area of our business that it's really affected is YA.
It doesn't go much younger than kind of young adult publishing because kids don't tend to read
Yeah,
digitally
yeah.
kind of any younger than 15-ish.
And I think all of us on the sort of younger age group are looking to do more interesting things in the app world, but that in itself has its own challenges.
Yeah.
And we do all, I think, all of
Yeah,
us sort of
because-
have activity there.
Yeah, e-books themselves, in the, you know, if we say any of our preschool TV shows, if we were to, e-books account for about generally 2-3% of the overall revenue generated. It's that small at the
But
moment.
growing.
Not massive. No.
Well, no, actually,
It's really
in
not.
America,
Yeah.
it's dropped off the cliff.
we're
Seriously.
Wow.
We're seeing apps. I mean, and that's the thing. I think
App
the
development
ebooks are actually quite expensive in the ebook store, and you can get apps for free or 69p. So we're actually delivering our story content, our book content, as basically book apps now rather than enhanced ebooks, because nobody is in the ebook stores buying that content because it's expensive, and you're competing with apps that are free or 69p or 199. So we're actually delivering, where we're looking at is generally sort of storybook apps is what an area we're seeing growing, and that's where we're sort of putting more of our development.
And that then is an area, in terms of the students here, that is
Yeah.
an area you couldn't get into. I mean,
Yeah.
because what a lot of publishers are looking for is really, really innovative ways of bringing their picture books to life. And a lot of the stuff we've seen, particularly since the sort of the beginning of this part of the digital evolution, has been pretty awful, to be honest. So it really is an area that that publishers are looking at to not have to invest huge amounts of money, because at
Because
first
there's no guarantee.
there's no
of any
guarantee. Yeah.
kind of revenue coming back.
Yeah, the barriers to entry are much smaller in
Yeah.
that space, because you don't, it obviously will cost you money, but it doesn't cost you as much money to
Yeah.
create an app as it, an app book or an app story as it would obviously to create a TV show. And also, in order to get it out, you don't, you just have to work with Apple and any other people and submit it, and it can go through, and anyone can do that. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Copies
Yeah.
waiting
And
around.
there are a
Sorry,
few.
Jane.
Sorry, Helen.
No, go, you go.
There are a couple of really strong kind of partners that you can find. I mean, Eric and the guys at Made in Me,
Yeah.
James. I mean, they're doing something really
Yeah.
incredible. It's slow, and I mean, Kate Wilson and the guy at Nosy Crow have they're a loud voice in kind of the children's app market, and they've certainly made it a lot easier for everyone else to.
But it's hard
talk
to make
about.
money, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's the thing about apps is discoverability. And if you haven't got the big brands, so even though you might have the most beautiful picture book in the world and you think the greatest app, getting that cut through on the stores is really, really difficult.
When we talk to app developers, when they tell us, that their Apple revenue stream goes like that and spikes, and that's
Yeah.
it, you kind of have one shot.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're lucky enough that you get a pickup at the end of the year roundup. Whereas somewhere like Android, you have a longer tail. The incline is always tiny.
True. But what we found in YA is the growth has been the strongest, and that's because we think a lot of adults are buying some of the really, really good YA fiction that's out there. I mean, YA has become a much more, I suppose, trendy is a horrible word to use, I know, but it's become much more kind of accessible thanks to things like the Hunger Games, and we've all got sort of big series that have worked. And certainly in terms of publishing revenues, YA is one area that really, and I mean overall publishing, and I include adult in this, YA is the one star at the moment that is rising in terms of its market share. So,
And even there, I mean, that's big brands are doing really well. Maze
Yeah.
Runner, I mean, we'll sell whatever 5,000 copies a week
yeah.
on average, but that's
But the backlist doesn't sell.
it doesn't. They follow brands.
Yeah.
It's the Twilight effect.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've
Terrible to
heard
say
a
it.
lot of what the panel has to say. If you have a burning question, please put up your hand so the microphone comes to you. Where's the first burning question?
It's too
Tim,
early.
broadcast.
Too early in the morning.
Thanks,
Quick.
Tim.
I'm scared.
Okay, so if money wasn't an option, what brand would you buy into? If you could.
What now that exists out there that we don't?
You can't have at the moment.
Oh, well, I wish we had Minecraft, obviously. That's one that I wish we'd have.
And why? Obviously, but I want to know.
Because I think it truly is a transmedia property. I really think it's what, I mean, people throw around that term very loosely, and I think Minecraft have done that. I think it truly sits in that space where it works in very many different.
And does it surprise you to think that something like that has happened?
Not me, no. But I think it has surprised quite a few people. And I think it's surprised quite a few people in the publishing industry. It'd be interesting if someone from Egmont were here, because that's been a phenomenal success for Egmont in publishing, hasn't
And
it?
us.
And you in the States,
We have,
I beg your pardon.
we have it
of
globally.
course.
So Egmont have
course.
the UK. We have it.
Sorry, David. You're
Yeah.
right.
All right. We have
Anyone
Australia
else?
and the US.
Another question?
I would take Peppa Pig because we published the books. But we published the books on that, so I know how much money we make from the books. So if I could have a couple of % of the rest of it, I'd be very, very happy.
For those of you that don't know, Peppa Pig over the last 10 years has basically brought in $1 billion.
Yeah, it's for Penguin, actually, for Penguin Random House last year, across all of Penguin Random House in the UK, Peppa Pig was the second biggest thing that we did as a whole business. All the adult imprints, bigger than Jamie Oliver, bigger than all of the big cookery brands. Peppa Pig made us as a business more money than basically other than James Patterson.
And actually, we published some Peppa Pig in the States as well. Not a lot of people know that, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
But not to wish to think you should feel discouraged by this, but my understanding is that Peppa Pig was several years before it was picked up by a broadcaster. So Martin Baker and Astley, they had developed this thing and they couldn't get any traction on it for years. And eventually it suddenly took off. But meanwhile, they persevered. So those of you who are developing projects that haven't yet got any traction, sooner or later somebody will engage with it. Anybody else got a question? There.
Hi, so I just wanted to clarify, do you think that there is high enough revenue to going to add another dimension to story design, story writing with apps and ebooks? Ebooks are a little bit restricting in the sense that it's just words.
Yeah.
Do you think that apps can... I'm essentially asking, is it viable to use apps to make a larger world with publishing?
Yes.
Yeah, in very short.
With all the challenges that we've spoken about.
Yeah,
yes.
I think if you're going into it thinking this is going to make us millions of pounds, and that's the wrong approach. I think it's a good way of establishing and expanding your world. And I also think it's important, or we've sort of seen it happen with some things, that it's actually another route that people can engage with your brand. So I think we think about some of the apps that we do that don't earn a lot of money, but actually help more people engage with the brand and have different routes to sort of to have it. I think that sort of really helps the overall, affinity that people feel for what you're trying to do.
But you're absolutely right. If you're looking to make your millions out of it at the moment, and the current climate, then it would not be the place that would possibly sustain your business. But it certainly could be another. That's what I was sort of saying. It could be another part of your business.
To be fair, if you're looking to make your millions, this is probably not the
No,
business
this
anyway.
is true. This is true.
Okay, anybody else
Bless
got
you,
a burning
Howard.
question? Okay, we've had the advantage sitting up here of being able to look out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Try to see if we can spot fungi. You've had to look this way. Now you get the opportunity for 15 minutes to go out there and drink some coffee. Can I say thank you to Richard, Helen and David?
Okay.